Hello, my name is Deborah Dwork, and I am the director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, City University of New York. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the third of a year-long virtual series on the subject of the marginalized and the erased. The historical record is marked by voids, elided events, disappeared people, erased accounts, marginalized communities. Our series on the marginalized and the erased tackles a number of those blank spots in history and in our own time. I thank our series partners, NYU's Professor Emerita Marian Kaplan and Stockton University Professor Raz Sagal. I thank too Center Associate Juan Acevedo, whose suggestion prompted this panel, Dr. Eli Karetny, Deputy Director of the Ralph Bunche Institute, and the GC's terrific IT people, Brad Holshore and John Chinisi. Above all, I am grateful to our speakers and to everyone who has tuned in. Thank you for your interest in this subject. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Victoria Sanford, the chair of our panel. It is she who will have the honor of introducing our speakers. Victoria Sanford is Professor of Anthropology and founding director of the Center for Human Rights and Peace Studies at Lehman College. She is a member of the anthropology doctoral faculty at the Graduate Center and an affiliated scholar here at our center. A scholar activist, Victoria is as generous as she is brilliant. Both qualities shine bright in her scholarship, public engagement, and teaching. She is the recipient of many prestigious awards, and she is the author of many books. I mention just two: Buried Secrets, Truth and Human Rights in Guatemala is an unflinching examination of the genocidal campaign carried out by the Guatemalan army against the Maya, which claimed 200,000 lives and displaced 1.5 million. They, the victims and survivors, stand at the center of Victoria's account, what they endured, and their post-massacre's pursuit of truth, justice, and healing. I skip over many equally gripping works to land on Victoria's forthcoming Textures of Terror, the murder of Claudina Isabel Velázquez and her father's quest for justice. Accompanying Jorge Velázquez in his long search for answers after the brutal murder of his daughter, Victoria explores what it means to seek justice in, quote, post-conflict countries where violence never ended. Which brings us to our panel today, which I hasten to say came into being thanks to the brilliance and generosity of our speakers and our chair, Victoria Sanford. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that incredibly kind and generous introduction. And I want to thank you for pulling this together, and also Juan for having the idea to do this, which was just brilliant. And of course, Roz and Eli and Brad and John and everyone on the board, I'm honored to participate in at the center. We have such limited time, and I want to tell you Ana María Méndez Dardón, Tatiana Devia, Aída Hernández Castillo are just stellar scholars and stellar activists and have amazing careers. And I could spend the next 45 minutes speaking about each of them for 45 minutes. But I don't want to take away time from the actual discussion. And so instead of introducing each of them in the lovely and generous way Deborah just introduced me, I'm going to turn it over to each of them, and we'll do it the way we do in anthropology, which is we place ourselves in our work, who we are, what we do, and how it is that we came to be involved in this human rights work, in this work with the disappeared. And so we'll begin in just one moment, because the other thing that happened in the process of pulling this together, I got many emails from a lot of the people who were signed in today. And one of them was from my colleague, distinguished professor of physics, Eugene Chudnovsky, who's also a long-term leader in the Committee of Concerned Scientists. And he asked me if I would just please share a few names of cases they're still working on of the disappeared. One is Boris Weisfaller, who was disappeared on a hiking trip in Chile in 1985. He was a mathematics professor at Penn State. The Committee of Concerned Scientists is still seeking justice in that case. They're also working on cases of 3 different scholars from China. One is Tajpolat Tiyip, who was snatched by Chinese security forces at Beijing airport in 2017. He was the president of Xinjiang University. He has not been seen since. Rahil Dawood, an anthropology professor also at Xinjiang University, was snatched by security forces from a train in Beijing and never ever seen again. And Abdul Qadir Jalaluddin, who was a literature professor also at Xinjiang University, and he was disappeared and taken from his home in the middle of the night with a hood on his head. And I just wanted to share those stories because we're focusing on Latin America today, but this issue of political disappearance is something that happens all over the world. And I also just want to mention the responsibility that the United States has for so-called rendition cases, which is a term for forced disappearance. So before we go on and start with the questions, I want to introduce Ana María Méndez Dardón, and she'll give an overview of her human rights work and how she got to be doing what she's doing today. Ana María?
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this extraordinary panel. My name is Ana María Méndez Dardón, and I'm a human rights lawyer from Guatemala. I am also a survivor of the Guatemalan armed conflict. I have worked with several human rights organizations in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And I also work with the Guatemala's former Attorney General, Claudia Pasi Paz, as her under Private Secretary for Strategic Affairs, and as a special advisor at the UN-backed International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala. Currently, I'm director for Central America at the Washington Office on Latin America, promoting democracy and human rights in the region. And obviously, I'm involved in this human rights work because of my personal background, living in a region where several human rights violations occurred during the armed conflict in Guatemala.
Thank you, Ana María. Tatiana?
Thank you so much, Victoria. And first, also, thank you for making this happen. I am really excited to be part of this incredible panel. And of course, very grateful to the Graduate Center for setting this up. I am a staff attorney at Corporate Accountability Lab, a small nonprofit here in Chicago, which is where I am based. And I lead the Transitional Justice and Colombia program. But before becoming an attorney, actually my work was in forensic anthropology and dealing with this issue. My major is in anthropology, and I would say that I had probably a very early involvement in the field of human rights. I think that, similarly to Ana María, it comes from a personal history. I came here when I was 14 years old with my family under political asylum. This is at the time where the armed conflict and the violence was probably at its highest. And of course, it was not only unsustainable to stay in the country, but also dangerous. So I think that just probably generated this very deep curiosity to understand what was happening in my country. I couldn't go back to Colombia for almost 10 years. So I think it was just now ingrained in my DNA that this is what I wanted to do and investigate. So I became very much involved in anything that was related to human rights, armed conflict in Latin America. And I just wanted to understand it. And little by little started getting more into the practical area of things. And I was lucky enough to meet my former mentor, Dr. Heather Walsh-Haney at Florida Gulf Coast University, who really opened the door for me to continue exploring these issues while training in forensic studies. So that's how I came into this field. I got an internship with Equitas in Colombia, an organization investigating these issues, doing forensic investigations, investigating extrajudicial killings and searching for the disappeared. That internship turned into an almost 2-year-long project. And that's what I did for a few years. My my career path, I don't think it has been straightforward. After that, I actually ended up working with migrant farm worker communities in Florida, investigating human rights violations in the tomato fields, and then went to law school. And it was in law school where I took again this issue of transitional justice, and here I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tatiana. And so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Aída Hernández Castillo, who we have known each other since graduate school, and it's such a pleasure always to see you, whether in person or virtually. I wish this was in person, but I'm so happy to see you live from Buenos Aires. So Aída?
Okay, I also want to start by saying that CIESAS has a paradox of being a center, is the Center of Advanced Studies in Social Anthropology, in which we study disappearance, but we also have a colleague who disappeared in August 11, 2020. And I want to mention her name, Griselda Mayela Alvarez Rodriguez, who was the secretary of our master program. She disappeared in August 2020, and we're still searching for her. So I just want to make her absence present in this conversatory. So I'm a legal anthropologist and a feminist, and I became involved in human rights issues since my undergraduate studies. I was marked by the armed conflict in Central America, especially in Guatemala. And since the beginning of my academic career, I was always concerned of how to use my academic tools in the service of social justice. So I became a legal anthropologist, mainly because I was concerned with legal activism and how to make this alliance between legal anthropology and the struggle for justice. And in the last 30 years, I have worked as an expert witness in the Inter-American Court, in other international spheres, and also in national tribunals. But it was in the last 7 years that I got involved with the issue of disappearance. As many people know, it was in 2014 when 43 students from the Education School of Ayotzinapa in the state of Guerrero disappeared. And in the search of these 43 students, 120 mass graves were found only in the state of Guerrero. And this phenomenon mobilized relatives of disappeared people from the entire country, because none of these 120 mass graves were from the 43 students. So then the question, who was in these mass graves? So people that have lost, that had missing relatives came to the state of Guerrero and made evident to the national public that we had a terrible human rights crisis. In that moment, the official number was around 45,000 people that had been disappeared. And it made evident something that it was a scream in the streets during the rallies for the 43. Fue el Estado. It was the state. The complicity between the security forces and the organized crime put in the center what some analysts have called the existence of a narco state. And it was in this context that a group of young scholars, all of them women, decided to create the Grupo de Investigación en Antropología Social y Forense, the GIASF. And they invited me to be part of this group. They needed somebody who had tenure. And it was, I had my experience in legal anthropology. So CS, as my research center, that is a graduate research center, became the institutional support for HIAF. And it was through this path, HIAF is an independent and not institutionalized academic scholar and activist group. And it was through them that I started to work with relatives of missing persons.
Thank you so much, Aída. So clearly everyone who's been listening to the amazing work that these three women do, it's not only that they're exceptional scholars, but each of them has exceptional courage in the work that they do. So I'd like to start with the first round of questions. Ana María, Guatemala signed the last peace agreement 27 years ago. However, the human rights situation continues to be critical. What are the current political challenges in Guatemala regarding truth and historical memory, especially in relation to the disappeared?
Thank you for your question, Victoria. The situation in Guatemala is critical currently. And I always say that we were victims of the war, and now we are victims of the peace. And the current challenges, I believe, they are linked to the lack of measures to address one essential component of transitional justice settings, which is the non-repetition guarantees. So we failed promoting those measures, and now what we are seeing is a trend towards authoritarianism that is manifested by attacks, harassment, criminalization, and human rights violations against defenders, independent media, and justice operators. And authoritarianism is not a threat currently. Like, we are facing a new era of authoritarianism, and it's expressed in different ways. It's not the authoritarianism we faced during the armed conflict, but now this authoritarianism is expressed by the infiltration of illicit networks into the justice system and most of the state institutions. Unfortunately, in Guatemala currently, the Guatemalan elites, military officials, and corrupt politicians have co-opted most of the institutions, so the justice institution, the Congress, and many human rights institutions as well. And these elites, what they have done is to dismiss many post-conflict mechanisms, such as one program, which was the Programa Nacional de Resarcimiento, which is a national program for reparation for victims. So that had an impact on victims of forced disappearances as well. And they have weakened the justice system. They have weakened the justice system, particularly the public prosecutor's office, that at some point made huge steps towards justice for victims of gross human rights violations, such as the genocide trial, the sexual violence cases during the armed conflict, the Seprosarco case, for instance, because now the public prosecutor's office is led by Consuelo Porras, who actually was sanctioned by the US State Department as a corrupt actor and for her responsibility in obstruction of justice. So these undemocratic practices now, as I said, are very complex because they have an impact on people and on victims of the armed conflict as well. And because these elites are criminalizing judges and prosecutors that had played a key role in promoting justice for these cases. And I can mention two of them. Unfortunately, many of these justice operators now live in exile, and human rights defenders as well live in exile due to these harassment and attacks. Two cases is Claudia Paz y Paz, who worked in these transitional justice cases. And the recent case of Judge Miguel Angel Galvez, for instance, who had a key role in a case known as a Diario Militar, and I can provide more information later. And there's another thing that as well that is a current challenge, but it's this is something as a consequences of the lack of non-repetition guarantees, that is the repression against indigenous communities. So indigenous communities who were the people more affected by the armed conflict, now are resistant, and they are against these extractive practices in their lands. So these communities also face harassment, attacks by the military and the security forces. So in conclusion, I believe that these challenges are, as I say, rooted in the lack of measures and post-transitional justice. And because despite the fact that Guatemala made some changes with Claudia Paz y Paz, with the International Commission Against Impunity, CC, by promoting justice and promoting and working against this endemic corruption that we still are having in Guatemala, those changes now are dismissed by these elites.
Thank you so much, Ana Maria. Tatiana, can you talk a little bit about the Colombian organizations? Was there a shift in the way Colombian organizations or civil society in general approached the issue of finding the disappeared upon establishment of the transitional justice system?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Victoria. This is a massive, complex conflict that I'm sure many of us here have heard about. It's a decades-long conflict, and over 200 people have been killed, over 7 million people have been displaced, and conservative estimates before the establishment of the Truth Commission said that probably over 60,000, others said probably over 80,000 people have been listed as disappeared. The Truth Commission and this recent transitional justice system has actually increased that number. So this is an issue that was part of the agenda even prior to the establishment of the current transitional justice system. And from personal experience, I think my address the question a little bit better, but through my work with Equitas, it was pretty evident that organizations, that we were all working in a hostile environment, in a difficult environment where there was more of the status quo was denying that this was such an extreme issue and such a reality that over 90,000 people have been listed as disappeared. There were safety issues. Human rights defenders in Colombia are victims of attacks on a daily basis. Back in those years that I was working in Colombia, this really was the reality. So there were no effective frameworks, an issue of safety, bureaucratic hurdles, of course, no funding. So it was not an easy task. Now, with the establishment of the transitional justice system, I absolutely think that there was a major shift, right? I mean, this transitional justice came with a very sophisticated system that established not just an ad hoc tribunal through the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, but also this Truth Commission and a special unit. I mean, just think of the magnitude of this issue, that this transitional system actually had to set up an entire special unit to search for the disappeared. So that, I think that shifted the environment, right? It created a framework. It definitely improved the environment. I'm not going to say that it made it better completely, and that there was a complete turnaround, because unfortunately that's not the reality. I mean, this is still an issue in Colombia, but there was definitely an improvement, just the creation of the framework, of the language, and above anything, the tools, right? Through the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, through this special unit, and through the Truth Commission, to now embed this and support a civil society organization. So I think that definitely there was a shift, which makes us think again about the function and the importance of this transitional justice mechanisms, but also how to set them up to address the magnitude of this specific issue. Basically saying, no, the Truth Commission was not enough. There has to be something else. So I I'm happy to report that, but again, it's not like it has been 100% solved, but I'm happy to see the shift.
Great, thank you so much, Tatiana. Aída, can you discuss your experience in searching for the missing and disappeared in Mexico? And I'm also wondering if previous processes in Guatemala or Mexico inform or influence the Mexican process, and if so, in what ways? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as a legal anthropologist, I had previous experience of elaborating expert witness report, as I told you. But my first experience working with collectives of relatives of missing person, one of the surprises that I found, it was in the north of Mexico, in the state of Sinaloa, with a group called Las Rastreadoras, the Trackers, that had this slogan, no queremos justicia, queremos encontrar a nuestros tesoros. We do not want justice, we just want to find our treasures. And this slogan, it was a big contrast with the slogan in the, for example, now in Argentina with the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, no? And it was mainly related with the total distrust with the state justice on one hand, because of the complicity with the organized crime. And also it was a message to the perpetrators that still have control of the regions in which they search for the bodies of their relatives. So by saying we do not search for justice, it was a way to ensure that they will be allowed to enter into these areas under territorial control. So my legal expertise in legal activism were useless in this context. So in this context, it was mainly our work with memory workshops that I put into the service. I had previous experiences working with women in prisons, doing life stories and helping them to write their own books. So through these memory workshops, we accompany them with my colleague Carolina Robledo to write the life stories of their kids and of their own struggles as mothers, as wives, as sisters of missing men and women. And the first book called Nadie Detiene el Amor, that was written by them and published by a collective of inmates, women in the state of Morelos. It was a way for them to confront the criminalization of their relatives that had been done by the media and by some local governments, in which there is the idea that people disappear is because they must be involved in some kind of organized crime networks. But when you have men with weapons and impunity, there are many, many reasons for which you can be disappeared. So it was mainly through my work in memory workshops. And in that sense, the experience with the memory projects in Colombia had been very inspiring. We invite Alejandro Castillejos to come to Mexico to share the experience of the Commission of Memory here with us. And also we have the possibility to create some links with the new digital conversations with collectives of disappeared people, disappeared relatives in Colombia. And the other important inspiration had been the work of the team, the Guatemalan forensic team, with Freddy Pecherelli came to Mexico, had a meeting with the HIASP, and then we were able to get some academic support. So some of the trackers were able to go to Guatemala and be in a forensic training work with the forensic group in Guatemala. So there is also an appropriation of these forensic tools by the relatives, by the collectives of relatives of disappeared people. I don't have time to talk about this, but I think that it's very important in epistemological terms, how the epistemological hierarchies in which always the DNA and the genetics are in the top, and then you have the forensic teams there, are being flipped down by the appropriations that the relatives of missing persons are doing of forensic knowledge. And they are the experts in context analysis. So I think that there are many dialogues that are taking place between these three countries, and we're learning from the previous experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aída. Tatiana, can you just flick off your mic, please? Your sound's on. Thank you. Wonderful. So super interesting. I have lots of thoughts, but I'm going to move on to the next question so we can get through. Ana Maria, The International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, CICIG, led a model of hybrid justice, highlighting the important role of the international community in post-conflict settings. Did CICIG have an impact on post-transitional justice, and how has this informed current efforts to prosecute past cases of disappearances in Guatemala?
Thank you, Victoria. CICIG was created based on the Global Human Rights Agreement, a peace agreement, a Guatemalan peace agreement. So it is rooted in the peace process of Guatemala. And with CICIG's mandate, the state recognized the existence of some groups called CIACs based on the Spanish acronym, which means clandestine and security apparatuses that were embedded in the system. So this is very important because it did have an impact on post-transitional justice system, because CICIG mandate was to investigate and promote criminal investigations of those groups that at some point had a role in gross human rights violations, and then in the post-conflict era had a different role, more linked with corruption and other issues in the public administration. So also it's very important to note that CICIG mandate did not allow it to promote criminal prosecution of cases related to the armed conflict, but in a broad way to promote the end of impunity, the endemic impunity, and it had an impact on the justice system. Why and how? For instance, CICIG mandate has not just the mandate to promote investigations and dismantle these CIACs or these clandestine groups, but also to promote institutional reforms and more transparent institutions. So CICIG worked to strengthening the investigative capacities of the public prosecutor's office, and also the creation of high-risk courts, for instance. So these are two examples that I can provide. And then CICIG also demonstrated how the CIACs group transformed their activities, or the criminal activities, and how they were being more sophisticated, and how these groups that were made up by economic elites, military officials in the peace era had a key role in the administration and the public arena. So many cases I can provide as well. A big case is the case of Otto Pérez Molina, who was the president of Guatemala, and he was a military that had an active role during the genocide, the Shield genocide in Quiché. And then when he was president, CICIG exposed his role in this large scheme of corruption during his presidency. So this is something, and I just wanted to finalize these to link with your first question about the current challenges. So unfortunately, despite these efforts that CICIG made, such as the creation of the high-risk courts, now these judges that had a key role promoting transitional justice and promoting justice for corruption, now they are in exile. A current decision that was made these days is a decision for Judge Claudette Dominguez. But they basically release a war criminal linked to the military case. So now they are not just harassing people that had this role, but also trying to overturn these cases, such as the death squad dossier known as a military diary case. So this is an example. The person that was released under a domiciliary arrest is Toribio Acevedo, who is a war criminal.
The war criminal, yeah. Yeah, it's a really good example of the collapse of the justice system. Thank you, Ana Maria. Tatiana, what are the most relevant findings or themes associated with the current transitional justice framework in Colombia?
Yeah, so this Truth Commission final report was just released this summer in June, I believe. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. However, it's a it was a massive undertaking, right? Again, decades long of conflict, very complex situations, several regions all affected by the armed conflict. This is a multi-volume final report. But if we are going to try to focus on something, I think the first volume on the findings and recommendations, which in itself, it's also a massive volume, close to 800 pages, just this one. It gives us a really, really interesting map, I would say, with testimonies, with regional focus, just to make those comparisons. Again, the Truth Commission and the way it operated, it definitely created a forum, a space, not just for organizations to contribute to this to the system, but for families, entire communities to bring in their testimonies and to really establish a final report that was comprehensive. So there are differences, and they are very interesting findings. The really good part of this is that it's based on different regions, and it definitely helps the alignment, I would say, but it also, I think, identifies very clearly the challenges and the needs and the gaps, right, of aligning, for example, not just these findings with special unit for the search of the disappeared, but also with the institutions. So it really provides, I think, one theme here is the theme of denial of all the challenges that these families and these organizations and these communities went through prior to the establishment of the transitional justice system. And it provides recommendations, I believe it's recommendation number 14, so that the report can provide direction on what's needed in the field, which also that's the other thing. And I think not just for Colombia, but at a regional level, the Truth Commission's final report is not enough, right? If there is no follow-up, if there are no recommendations that become embedded, not just in the follow-up mechanisms, but in the institution itself, then it's obsolete, correct? So I think
Right.
that the report itself does a really good job establishing and putting together the information, not just in a testimonial format, but also in a way that provides very concrete direction on what's needed. Again, not just from the transitional justice system, but from the broader Colombian institutionality.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. We can certainly see some themes that are arising, commonalities amongst the experiences in these three different countries. Aída, what do you see as the role of the Mexican state in the search for the disappeared and the resolution of thousands of open claims? What would be a fair and just intervention on the part of the state? What might that look like? What would need to happen to make I mean, that's the big question, right? What would need to happen to get the Mexican state to have the political will to actually make it happen, instead of being how to become part of the solution instead of part of the problem, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at in all three countries.
Well, this is a complex question, but let me see, what can I say in these 3 minutes? Well, first, it's important to recognize that as a result of the organization of the relatives of missing person in Mexico that had created a huge national movement, el Movimiento Nacional por Nuestros Desaparecidos, Enlaces Nacionales, we had very important legal and institutional changes. Just to give you an example, in 2013, we have the National Congress passed the National Law of Victims. In 2017, the National General Law for Disappearance, against forced disappearance and the disappearance, y el Sistema Nacional de Búsqueda de Personas, the National System of Search for Person. Just last year, the Extraordinary Mechanism of Forensic Identification. All these changes also have created a very complicated apparatus. Although it's important to have these new laws, what we have also are new spaces of re-victimization, a new labyrinth to navigate for the relatives of persons that are searching for their loved ones and also for justice. And one of the main problems is that the security forces, but also the judicial system, it also makes a lot of resembles what is going on in Guatemala, is infiltrated or is part of this network of organized crime. One example is the state persecutor in the state of Morelos, where I live, Uriel Carmona, who has been denounced for his links with one local cartel. And he is the person in charge of the judicial investigations of 2 clandestine graves, common graves that have been used in a clandestine form. So we even created a new term, that is the clandestine mass graves of the state, because there are common mass graves that have been used to disappear people, and they have found bodies with torture marks in their their bodies, and even without any files. And is this persecutor the person in charge? And there have been many denounced against him and his links. But we still have him in front of the justice system. And in the national levels, we have Hertz Manero, who had been accused of gender violence and had been accused of using his position against victims and even against the scientific community that had been accused him for his actions, had penal cases against some scientists. So until we do not clean the justice system, it is very difficult to find justice. And the second element that is very problematic is the role of the army. What we have now in this leftist government is an empowerment of the army that we have not had in previous governments. What the right could not done, because we took the streets when they tried to do it, had been done by a Congress that is controlled by the now official party Morena. So we have the army with the National Guard in charge through a constitutional amendment of the security, of the civil security. We have the army in the customs system. We have the army in front of the main development project, the Tren Maya of the present state. And it's the same army that had been accused of human rights violation. And now we even have the army in CONACYT, in the scientist forum, because they argue that they also do scientific research. So now is for first time there are army people in the advising committee of the scientific body of CONACYT. So we are in a context in which it is very difficult to make any changes if we do not clean the narco state. And I don't have time, but the other issue is all the 52 bodies that are under the custody of the state in mass graves, what is called the forensic crisis. So we don't have, if we don't have an identification of all the bodies, we have officially recognized 100,000 people disappeared and 52 bodies under state mass graves. Just basic mathematics. We have to start with identification of all those bodies that are under the state control.
Thank you so much, Aída, for getting so much information packed into such a short period of time. We can certainly see this infiltration of the state and control happening in all 3 countries as well. And Ana María, given the lack of access to justice in Guatemala, what should be the role of international human rights protection mechanisms for victims? And how can these mechanisms be made more accessible to victims?
So, as I mentioned, unfortunately, in Guatemala, we lack of national and domestic resources in terms of justice. So the role of the international community is critical at this moment. Particularly, I think that the UN and the Organization of American States could be playing an active role to preventing these authoritarian practices. And for victims, I think that, for instance, the Organization of American States should make more effective their measures to protect human rights offenders and to protect victims of forced disappearances and gross human rights violation, by the cases that many civil society organizations failed before them. So I think the Organization of American States had a key role on this. And in terms of the forced disappearance, I think that many countries should be solidary with Guatemala, such as Mexico, the United States, Canada, using diplomatic tools to introduce conditions on assistance to Guatemala. We rely on the assistance of the US assistant, the Mexican assistant, and so on, but we haven't seen any public statement from any leader from other countries or the international community denouncing what is happening. So we believe that silence is not that thing that the international community just cannot be in that way. So we need an active role in these, using these diplomatic tools, as I said. And for the four disciplines, I think using those diplomatic tools in order to press for some initiatives to be accomplished. For instance, in 2019, former Congresswoman Sandra Moran, she presented a law to promote the search of disappeared persons and the creation of this national register of disappearance persons and the genetic data bank for forensic. This is very important because this law, if you read it, it only not state the disappearance related to the armed conflict, but the disappearance related to migration, which is a huge issue currently in Guatemala. So I think the international community had different tools, different conventions, a different mechanism that can be more active, that unfortunately we haven't seen any active role so far.
Thank you so much, Ana Maria. Tatiana, what are your expectations of outcomes with the release of the final Truth Commission report? And how do you think this will impact the future of Colombia? I'm thinking especially about the unresolved cases of the disappeared.
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, as far as expectations, and I'm already seeing this being part of the conversation and the agenda, but I'm hoping that the findings, the outcome of the Truth Commission and the report strengthens the work of the special unit for the search of the disappeared. Again, I think that the report and the work of the Truth Commission is definitely the map and helps align all these different pieces. There is going to be a follow-up commission to the findings of this report, which is great, and I hope that the integrity of the Truth Commission also moves on and is also represented and reflected in this follow-up commission that is, I believe, now active. Right, there are very specific findings and recommendations. For example, the number of bodies, the thousands, I think over 25,000 bodies that are in different cemeteries throughout the country that have been not identified. I am really hoping that this is the work that between the Truth Commission, the follow-up Truth Commission, excuse me, and the special unit is completed, accomplished somehow. And also this issue of judicial accountability, right? This Truth Commission work and the report itself, it's as I mentioned, sets up a foundation for the upcoming processes within the special jurisdiction for peace, this ad hoc tribunal, or the HEP as it's known in Colombia. So judicial accountability is also, goes hand in hand with the findings of this report. And I want to give an example of the importance of this type of endeavors, but the Brazilian National Truth Commission years ago released its final report, and there was always criticism, right, around the lack of follow-up and accountability, particularly, and because of the work that I do, the accountability for the private sector, those who funded the conflict, those who supported the dictatorship in different ways. And it was through the findings of the Truth Commission's final report that investigations were later on initiated. And last year, for example, Volkswagen, the car company, entered into a final settlement with the government because of their support for the for the dictatorship. But I want to share that the Federal University of Sao Paulo is due to receive, and I believe they already did, millions to support the forensic their work and the forensic work, and also for the Forensic Anthropology and Archaeology Center. This to support the identification of victims who are buried in mass graves. And some of the funds are also going to the development of new research to investigate the complicity of companies in human rights violations during the military government. So what the Truth Commission reports contain is important, does lead to investigation, and I am hoping that in the case of Colombia, that this is the case as well when it comes to judicial accountability and truth and memory.
Great. Thank you so much, Tatiana. And thank you also for including this issue of corporate accountability, which I know is one of your areas of expertise in law. So extraordinarily important. Thank you. Aída, I have another question for you. What do you see as current and future strategies of resistance for Mexican citizens, for families, for communities? You touched on this a little bit, but what do you see as both current and future strategies? And then do you see commonalities or divergence with the Guatemalan and Colombian experiences? Thank you. Tatiana, could you turn your mic off also, please? Thank you.
Well, let me start with the communalities so I can address an issue that is very important for me to point out in this event, and is the transnational character of the problem and the role of the United States in the army industry, and also in the training of the perpetrators. Every time that I give a talk for a US audience, I'm always concerned that my talk could contribute to create the idea of political underdevelopment or weak institutions that have no relationship with what is going on in the other side of the border. So it is important for me to use this last minute to remember that the weapons used by the army and the paramilitaries in Guatemala and Colombia during the internal conflicts, and by the organized crime after the internal conflicts, and not right now in this present moment in Mexico, come from an industrial complex, military industrial complex that has a very important locus in the United States. And with the weapons, there is also a military culture that travels, ways of torture, forms of torture, the treatment of the human bodies that also travels with the weapons. And the main example is the School of the Americas, in which the Caibiles from Guatemala were trained. And we know that many of those Caibiles became the base elements in the Zetas, one of the most bloodiest cartels in Mexico. So the ways they have been cutting bodies, have been using torture, had been learned and come from the School of the Americas. So I think that our realities in the global north and the south are much more linked than what they appear. And sometimes the political science perspectives on weak institutions are missing this part of the analysis. We also have in common in the three countries the role of women. The role of women in the collectives that are searching for peace, the relatives of disappears, but also as scholars, as activist scholars in the three countries. And I think that as feminists, that's something that we should analyze more. How the peace building process and the role of women in the peace building process. And of course, one of the main differences has to do with the post-conflict context in Guatemala and Colombia that still have a lot of complications, but we have a transitional justice discourse that had been also appropriated as tool for their struggles that does not exist in Mexico and is not relevant for the majority of the collectives in Mexico. And what do I see for the future? I always say that these women that I work with are my teachers, my professors, because they have become one of the most important political elements in the peace building context of Mexico, because they are not only searching for their loved ones, they are also becoming teachers and educators in a peace building. They go to schools, to prisons, to churches, to community centers, and they have a very important training discourse about peace building against violent masculinities. So I see this right now in this present moment in my state of Morelos. The National Brigade is taking place, and Collective for All Mexico are getting together in Morelos, not just for search, but also for peace building. So what I see a very important bet for the reconstruction of the social texture in which these political actors are very, very important. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aída. We have a few minutes left, and so I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to give a concluding comment or ask a question. In our group, we have 4 minutes left, so why don't you each take 1 minute if you have a concluding comment that you would like to make or a thought to share. We do have some questions in the Q&A, but I don't think we have time to reach them. So maybe folks could put their emails in so that Ana María and Tatiana and Aída can respond directly to you via email afterwards. So Ana María, in 1.5 minutes or less, any closing comments, please?
Thank you, Victoria. I think I don't want to lose hope because the situation in Guatemala is super complex, and it's hard to see a window of opportunity now, given that the general elections will take place next year. But I think the role of us, for instance, in WOLA and the academia and so on, is to continue supporting and strengthening the role of victims, civil society organizations, and independent judges, and try to ensure and create more protection mechanism for those people that are on the front and demanding justice in the field. So I think that's the last thing that we can do. And there were a question there, I think it's a moral question about how the intervention from the international community can be a neo-colonial activity, but I think that it is needed because we don't want to Guatemala to see as a Nicaragua, and we are following that path. We are following that playbook. So many things going on, but we don't lose the hope. We are continue working to promoting human rights in Guatemala.
Thank you so much, Ana María. And I think that's a really good point as we conclude, is that we all do this really difficult work because we believe in accompanying people in the present, and we believe in hope for the future. Tatiana, in 1 minute or less, there are 2 minutes left, one for you and one for Aída.
Wonderful. This is hard, but I kind of want to follow up a little bit on what Ana María said and the importance of, or the relevance of the political environment and how that affects specific mechanisms. In the case of Colombia, unfortunately, we had a very hostile environment for the transitional justice system to continue developing under the administration of Iván Duque. This political environment, I mean, it mattered because at the end, it was such a detriment for the different institutions within the transitional justice system to perform their work. We have a new administration right now, from what I hear, that has been changing. Different groups who had been ignored for the last few years are now being, finally part of the conversation. So this issue of the political environment it's such a big thing, and we can definitely should not ignore that. And I do have a question for Ana María. We don't have time, but I just want to put it on our radar, and I'll follow up with Ana María separately. But it's the issue of guarantees of non-repetition, that this realm of transitional justice that has been kind of ignored. And we see in the case of Guatemala, this was such a huge, I hate to use this word, but fiasco, right? And I'm just interested in knowing, just so that Colombia can learn from that, what would have been a good, system to set in place that would have addressed this, taking care of this realm of guarantees of non-repetition.
So we have a topic for another roundtable discussion then, because that's extraordinarily important. And I also, before I turn it over to Aída, I want to say personally that I have great hope. And one of the reasons I have great hope is that the former commissioner of the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, Iván Velázquez, one of the most courageous jurists I've ever had the honor to meet in my life, is now the first civilian minister of defense in Colombia. And I believe great change will come because of him having that position and the experience that he brings to it. Aída, you have the final word.
Well, I also want to be optimist, and I want to give a message to the young scholars that are listening. I know some of my students are linked right now, and I really believe that we have a role to play as activist scholars in changing the situation of our countries. I think that critical thinking is basic to confront stigmatization, criminalization, but also our tools in legal as expert witness, in documentation. So I think that the academic careers can be more important for social justice than just to make careers and write books that will be in libraries that very few people will read. I just want to make a call to create a different kind of academia in which we can play at least a minimal role in the social change that we need for Latin America. And also I think that we need more conversations like this. We need to get together with more time and in present to be able, I have many questions for Ana María and for Tatiana, but we don't have the space. So I hope that it will be the beginning of other kind of talks and dialogues. And thank you to Deborah and you for making this possible.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Deborah, we will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria, Ana Maria, Tatiana, and Aída. Thank you for the work that each of you does and for sharing it with us, for your participation in this event. Indeed, many thanks to everyone, speakers and listeners, for joining today. The conversation prompts all of us to think and then to think anew. Thank you. Until next time.